You don't need control over life, only control over yourself. That's where calm begins. Pressure reveals the mind. When everything is calm, anyone can appear strong. But when life tightens its grip, when expectations rise, emotions surge, and outcomes feel uncertain, that is when true control is tested. Stoicism does not promise a life without pressure. It offers something far more valuable: mastery within pressure. To be calm under pressure is not to be passive. It is not to suppress emotion or deny reality. It is the ability to remain steady while the world moves violently around you. It is the discipline to choose reason over reaction, clarity over chaos, and control over impulse. The Stoic understands a fundamental truth: pressure itself is not the enemy. The real threat is the uncontrolled response to it. Events do not disturb the mind, judgments do. The moment pressure arises, the mind rushes to label it as danger, failure, or threat. Stoicism trains the mind to pause before accepting that judgment. Calm begins with awareness. The moment pressure appears, notice it without resistance. Observe the tightening in the body, the acceleration of thoughts, the urge to react immediately. This observation creates distance, and distance creates choice. Without distance, there is only instinct. With distance, there is control. Mental control is built by separating what can be controlled from what cannot. External events, other people's opinions, outcomes, timing, these lie outside command. Thoughts, judgments, actions, and effort remain fully within it. Pressure becomes overwhelming only when energy is wasted fighting what cannot be changed. When facing intense situations, the Stoic mind asks a simple question: what is required right now? Not what is feared, not what is imagined, not what might happen later, only what the present moment demands. This focus narrows the mind, quiets anxiety, and restores power. Calm is not found by escaping difficulty. It is forged by walking directly into it with discipline. Pressure exposes weaknesses in attention, patience, and emotional regulation. Instead of resenting pressure, the Stoic uses it as training. Each stressful moment becomes practice in self-command. The breath is the first tool of control. Slow, deliberate breathing sends a signal of stability to the mind. A steady breath anchors awareness in the present. When the breath is controlled, the nervous system follows. This is not mysticism, it is practical self-regulation. Thoughts under pressure tend to exaggerate. They predict catastrophe, inflate consequences, and create urgency where none exists. The Stoic does not argue with these thoughts emotionally. Instead, they are examined logically. Is this thought useful? Is it true? Does it help action? If not, it is released. Silence is another weapon of control. Not every pressure demands immediate response. Silence allows reason to surface. Words spoken too quickly often serve emotion, not wisdom. The Stoic chooses restraint, knowing that control over speech reflects control over the mind. There is also strength in acceptance. Acceptance does not mean approval. It means acknowledging reality as it is without complaint. Resistance to reality multiplies pressure. Acceptance removes unnecessary suffering and preserves energy for meaningful action. Stoicism teaches that the mind must be trained before pressure arrives. One does not learn calm in the middle of chaos. Daily discipline, reflection, restraint, voluntary discomfort builds resilience. When pressure comes, the mind responds from habit, not hope. One powerful practice is negative visualization, calmly imagining challenges before they occur. This does not create fear, it removes surprise. When difficulties are expected, they lose their power to shock the mind. Pressure feels lighter when it has already been rehearsed. Another practice is voluntary hardship. By choosing small discomforts, cold, silence, restraint, the mind learns that discomfort is survivable. Pressure loses its authority when the mind no longer fears discomfort. Mental control also requires humility. Not every battle needs to be won. Not every challenge defines worth. The Stoic does not attach identity to outcomes. Effort matters more than results. Integrity matters more than approval. Under pressure, ego seeks control over everything. Wisdom seeks control over self. When ego is abandoned, calm naturally arises. There is no need to prove strength when strength is already present. Time perspective is essential. Most pressures feel intense because they are viewed too closely. Step back. Ask whether this moment will matter in a year, a decade, or at the end of life. This perspective dissolves false urgency and restores balance. Calm under pressure is also moral strength. Acting with virtue despite fear is the highest form of control. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is action guided by reason in the presence of fear. When mistakes occur, the Stoic does not collapse into self-criticism. Reflection replaces regret. Lessons replace blame. Growth replaces shame. Mental control includes control over how failure is interpreted. Pressure often comes from the desire to control others' opinions. The Stoic releases this burden. Approval is external, character is internal. Peace follows the path of character. In moments of extreme stress, return to simplicity. Focus on one task, one breath, one decision. Complexity feeds anxiety. Simplicity restores order. The Stoic mind is not cold or detached. It is disciplined and free. Emotions are acknowledged, not obeyed. Feelings arise, but actions remain governed by reason. Over time, consistent practice transforms the relationship with pressure. What once caused panic becomes manageable. What once felt overwhelming becomes familiar. Calm becomes a default state, not a rare achievement. Mental control under pressure is not perfection, it is progress. Each moment of restraint strengthens the next. Each calm response builds confidence in the mind's ability to endure. The world will always apply pressure. Deadlines will exist. Conflict will arise. Uncertainty will remain. Stoicism does not remove these forces, it removes their power to dominate the mind. True calm is not the absence of noise, but the presence of order within. True control is not dominance over events, but mastery of response. When pressure comes, remember this: nothing external can command the mind without permission. Calm is a choice, control is a practice, and wisdom is the guide that keeps both intact. Pressure does not control the mind, judgment does. This truth stands at the center of inner calm, yet it is often misunderstood. When pressure arrives, most people believe the situation itself is responsible for their stress, fear, or panic. A deadline feels heavy, conflict feels unbearable, uncertainty feels threatening. But the Stoic understanding is clear: events are neutral. They carry no emotional weight on their own. The mind assigns meaning, and that meaning determines whether pressure becomes manageable or overwhelming. The moment something challenging occurs, the mind rushes to interpret it. It labels the situation as dangerous, unfair, or catastrophic. These judgments happen so quickly that they feel automatic, almost invisible. Yet it is not the event that tightens the chest or accelerates the heartbeat, it is the belief attached to the event. Remove the judgment and the pressure weakens immediately. Change the interpretation and the emotional response changes with it. Consider how two people can face the same situation and respond entirely differently. One becomes anxious and loses clarity, while the other remains calm and focused. The difference is not strength or luck, it is judgment. One mind sees threat and loss, the other sees a challenge or a task. The Stoic trains the mind to recognize this distinction and to interrupt automatic reactions before they take control. This interruption begins with awareness. When pressure arises, the Stoic does not immediately react. Instead, there is a pause, a brief moment where the mind steps back and observes. Thoughts are noticed, not believed. Emotions are felt, not obeyed. This pause creates space between stimulus and response, and in that space lies freedom. Without it, the mind is ruled by impulse. With it, the mind regains authority. Judgment often exaggerates reality. Under pressure, the mind predicts worst-case outcomes, inflates consequences, and convinces itself that failure is permanent. Stoicism teaches that most of this mental noise is unnecessary. By questioning these thoughts, the mind regains clarity. Is this situation truly as dangerous as it feels? Will this moment matter as much as the mind insists? Is fear improving the response or weakening it? When examined calmly, many judgments collapse under their own weight. Replacing harmful judgments with rational ones is a skill built through practice. Instead of telling the mind, "This is unbearable," the Stoic reframes it as, "This is difficult but manageable." Instead of thinking, "This must not happen," the mind shifts to, "This is happening and I will respond well." These are not empty affirmations. They are grounded in reason and reality. Difficulty does not disappear, but suffering decreases. Control over judgment does not mean emotional suppression. Emotions will still arise, especially under pressure. The Stoic does not deny fear or stress, but refuses to let them dictate action. Emotions are treated as signals, not commands. By refusing to obey every emotional impulse, the mind maintains stability even when feelings surge. Over time, this practice reshapes the mind's default response to pressure. What once triggered panic becomes familiar territory. Challenges are met with composure instead of chaos. The mind learns that it can endure discomfort without collapsing. Confidence grows not from avoiding pressure, but from mastering the response to it. True mental freedom is not found in controlling the world, but in controlling interpretation of it. When judgment is disciplined, pressure loses its power. The situation remains, but the suffering fades. Calm is no longer dependent on external conditions, it becomes an internal skill. This is the Stoic path to unshakable control, quiet, deliberate, and deeply resilient, but focus only on what is within your control. This idea appears simple, yet it is one of the most powerful mental disciplines a person can develop. Most pressure, anxiety, and inner turmoil come from directing energy toward things that cannot be commanded. Outcomes. Other people's behavior, timing, luck, and external approval sit outside personal authority. When the mind tries to manage them anyway, it creates tension without progress. Stoicism restores calm by redirecting attention to what truly belongs to the self. The moment pressure appears, the mind usually expands outward. It worries about results, imagines consequences, and attempts to predict how others will react. This outward focus weakens mental stability because it depends on variables that are constantly shifting. The Stoic response is to bring attention back inward. Not inward in a selfish sense, but inward to the realm of choice. Thoughts, judgments, effort and actions remain fully within control at all times, regardless of circumstances. When this distinction becomes clear, pressure begins to shrink. A challenge no longer feels overwhelming because responsibility is no longer misplaced. The task is not to guarantee success, approval or comfort. The task is to act with reason, integrity and discipline. Success becomes a bonus, not a requirement for peace. Failure becomes information, not a verdict on worth. This shift in focus immediately improves decision-making. Under pressure, trying to control outcomes creates urgency and fear which cloud judgment. By focusing only on the quality of action, the mind becomes calmer and sharper. Attention narrows to the next correct step instead of the final result. This clarity allows better performance, even though performance is no longer the primary concern. Letting go of what cannot be controlled does not mean indifference. It means refusing to waste emotional energy on what offers no leverage. Effort is applied where it matters. Worry is reduced where it does not. This disciplined allocation of attention is a form of mental economy. Energy conserved from useless struggle is redirected toward purposeful action. One of the greatest sources of pressure is attachment to other people's opinions. Approval feels necessary, criticism feels threatening, and judgment feels personal. Stoicism teaches that opinions exist entirely outside personal control. No amount of effort can guarantee praise or prevent misunderstanding. When this truth is accepted, a heavy burden is lifted. Actions are guided by values rather than applause. Calm grows from self-respect instead of external validation. The same principle applies to outcomes. The mind often equates effort with entitlement to success. When results do not align with expectations, frustration arises. Stoicism removes this false equation. Effort is always controllable, results are not. By committing fully to effort and releasing attachment to outcome, the mind remains steady regardless of how events unfold. Focusing on control also strengthens resilience. When setbacks occur, the Stoic does not feel powerless. Even in loss, control remains over interpretation, response, and next action. Nothing essential is taken away. This perspective transforms obstacles into opportunities for discipline rather than sources of despair. Over time, this practice reshapes the mind's relationship with pressure. Situations that once triggered anxiety now feel manageable. The mind no longer fights reality. It works with it. Calm becomes a natural state, not because life becomes easier, but because attention is placed where it belongs. Control, in the Stoic sense, is not about dominance. It is about responsibility, taking full responsibility for thoughts and actions while releasing responsibility for everything else creates freedom. Pressure loses its grip when the mind stops demanding control over the uncontrollable. By focusing only on what is within control, mental strength grows quietly but steadily. Peace becomes independent of circumstances. Action becomes deliberate. And under pressure, the mind stands firm not because the world obeys, but because the self does. Pause creates power. In moments of pressure, the greatest mistake is immediacy, the belief that something must be said, decided, or done right now. This illusion of urgency pulls the mind into reaction, where emotions dominate and clarity disappears. Stoicism teaches that between stimulus and response there is always a space, and within that space lies strength. The pause is not weakness or hesitation, it is the moment where control is reclaimed. When pressure strikes, the body reacts before the mind fully understands what is happening. The breath shortens, the heart rate increases, and thoughts begin racing. This physical response can quickly hijack reason if left unchecked. The Stoic response is to slow down deliberately. A single conscious breath can interrupt the cascade of panic. By slowing the body, the mind is given time to regain balance. This pause is an act of discipline. It resists the instinct to react emotionally or defensively. Instead of speaking immediately, the Stoic waits. Instead of acting impulsively, the Stoic observes. Silence becomes a tool, not an absence. In silence, emotions lose momentum and reason gains strength. Many conflicts escalate not because of events, but because of words spoken too quickly. The pause also allows separation between fact and interpretation. Under pressure, the mind often blends what is happening with what it fears might happen. By pausing, facts are examined without distortion. What is actually occurring right now? What evidence exists? What assumptions are being made? This clarity prevents unnecessary suffering caused by imagined outcomes. Controlled breathing is central to this practice. The breath is always available and always within control. Slow, deep breathing signals safety to the nervous system, reducing the intensity of emotional reactions. This physiological calm creates the conditions for rational thought. The Stoic understands that mastery of the mind begins with mastery of the breath. Pausing also restores perspective. Pressure narrows attention, making problems feel larger and more urgent than they truly are. A deliberate pause expands awareness. Time slows mentally even if the situation remains demanding. This mental expansion allows better judgment and more effective action. Many people fear pausing because they associate it with losing control. In reality, the opposite is true. Reacting immediately hands control to emotion and circumstance. Pausing takes control back. It is a declaration that the mind, not the situation, will decide the response. This practice requires courage. It is uncomfortable to sit with intense emotions without acting on them. Yet this discomfort is temporary, and the benefits are lasting. Each time the mind chooses pause over impulse, it becomes stronger. Self-trust grows. Confidence deepens, not from dominating situations, but from mastering response. Over time, the pause becomes natural. What once required effort becomes instinctive. The mind learns that it does not need to react to everything. Not every pressure demands an answer. Not every challenge requires immediate resolution. Some require patience, observation, and restraint. Silence under pressure is especially powerful. Silence prevents regret. Silence allows understanding. Silence often communicates more strength than words. The Stoic uses silence to maintain dignity and composure, even when provoked. The pause also protects values. Under pressure, it is easy to act against principles in the name of urgency or fear. Pausing allows alignment between action and character. Decisions are guided by reason rather than impulse, ensuring that integrity is preserved even in difficult moments. Ultimately, the pause transforms pressure into opportunity. Each stressful moment becomes a chance to practice discipline. Each urge to react becomes a reminder to slow down. Over time, calm replaces chaos, clarity replaces confusion, and control replaces fear. Power is not found in speed, it is found in restraint. The ability to pause is the ability to choose wisely. In that pause, the mind becomes free, and pressure loses its authority. Acceptance removes unnecessary suffering. Much of the pressure people experience does not come from the situation itself, but from the internal resistance to it. The mind argues with reality, insisting that things should be different, that events are unfair, or that discomfort should not exist. This resistance creates friction, and friction creates suffering. Stoicism teaches that peace begins when reality is acknowledged as it is, not as it is wished to be. Acceptance is often misunderstood as weakness or surrender. In truth, it is a form of clarity. It does not mean approving of hardship or giving up on improvement. It means recognizing what is happening without denial, complaint, or emotional rebellion. When the mind stops fighting reality, energy is freed for meaningful action. The moment pressure arises, the instinctive response is rejection. The mind tightens and resists, creating emotional tension. Thoughts spiral into frustration or anger. This reaction adds a second layer of pain on top of the original challenge. Acceptance removes this second layer. The situation remains difficult, but suffering is reduced because the mind no longer argues with facts. Stoicism distinguishes between pain and suffering. Pain is often unavoidable. Suffering is optional. Suffering is created by thoughts such as, "This should not be happening," or "I cannot tolerate this." Acceptance replaces these thoughts with a calm acknowledgement. This is happening, and I will deal with it. This shift may seem subtle, but it fundamentally changes the emotional experience. When acceptance is practiced, pressure loses its emotional charge. The mind stops wasting energy on protest and redirects it toward response. Action becomes clearer and more effective because it is no longer fueled by frustration. The Stoic responds to reality rather than reacting against it. Acceptance also strengthens resilience. When the mind learns that it can face discomfort without collapse, fear diminishes. Challenges no longer feel threatening, they become manageable. The mind gains confidence in its ability to endure. This confidence is quiet but powerful, rooted in experience rather than optimism. Another benefit of acceptance is emotional stability. By letting go of the need for events to align with personal expectations, emotional swings are reduced. Success does not create arrogance. Failure does not create despair. Both are met with the same steady composure. This balance allows long-term consistency rather than short bursts of motivation followed by exhaustion. Acceptance also improves relationships. Much conflict arises from resistance to other people's behavior. Expecting others to act according to personal preferences leads to disappointment and anger. Stoicism teaches acceptance of others as they are, not as they should be. This does not mean tolerating injustice, but it means removing emotional agitation from interactions. Calm responses lead to wiser outcomes. The practice of acceptance requires humility. It acknowledges that control is limited and that life does not revolve around personal desires. This humility is liberating. When the need to control everything is released, mental space opens, pressure eases, and the mind becomes more flexible. Acceptance is most powerful in moments of loss or setback. When expectations collapse, resistance intensifies pain. Acceptance allows grief without despair and disappointment without bitterness. It creates space for healing and adaptation rather than fixation on what cannot be changed. Over time, acceptance becomes a habit. The mind learns to meet challenges with steadiness instead of resistance. Pressure no longer feels personal. It is simply part of life's rhythm. This perspective restores peace even in difficult circumstances. Acceptance does not weaken ambition or effort. On the contrary, it sharpens them. By removing emotional resistance, energy is focused where it matters most, on purposeful action. The Stoic moves forward without being weighed down by complaint. In the end, acceptance is not about giving up. It is about standing firmly in reality. When reality is embraced, suffering fades, calm replaces conflict, and under pressure, the mind remains free, not because life is easy, but because resistance is gone. Discomfort is training, not punishment. Most people instinctively avoid discomfort, seeing it as something negative that must be escaped. Pressure, hardship, and unease are treated as signs that something has gone wrong. Stoicism offers a radically different view. Discomfort is not an enemy, it is a teacher. When understood correctly, discomfort becomes one of the most effective tools for building mental strength and calm under pressure. The mind often reacts to discomfort with fear or resistance. It tells itself that the feeling is unbearable, that it must be removed immediately. This reaction amplifies suffering. Stoicism teaches that discomfort by itself is rarely harmful. It is the interpretation of discomfort that creates distress. When the mind learns to sit with unease without panic, it discovers that discomfort is temporary and survivable. Training the mind begins with small voluntary challenges. By choosing controlled discomfort, the Stoic removes fear from it. Cold, silence, restraint, or delayed gratification teach the mind that comfort is not necessary for stability. These practices are not about punishment or self-denial for its own sake. They are about building familiarity with discomfort so that when real pressure arrives, it no longer feels overwhelming. Each encounter with discomfort strengthens resilience. The mind learns that it can function, think clearly, and act wisely even when conditions are not ideal. This confidence is not loud or dramatic. It grows quietly, built on repeated proof that discomfort does not equal danger. When pressure arises unexpectedly, the trained mind remains steady because it has been there before. Discomfort also exposes weakness in attention and discipline. Under stress, habits are revealed. Impatience, impulsiveness, and emotional reactivity surface. Instead of avoiding these moments, the Stoic uses them as feedback. Discomfort highlights areas that need strengthening. In this way, hardship becomes information rather than punishment. Pressure without preparation overwhelms. Pressure with training sharpens. By embracing discomfort intentionally, the Stoic turns life itself into a training ground. Daily inconveniences are no longer irritations, they are opportunities to practice restraint and composure. This mindset transforms the ordinary struggles of life into tools for growth. Discomfort also teaches humility. It reminds the mind that it is not entitled to constant ease. This humility removes entitlement and replaces it with gratitude. Comfort becomes appreciated rather than expected. When comfort is not required for peace, peace becomes more reliable. Another benefit of discomfort is emotional control. Strong emotions often arise when comfort is threatened. By practicing tolerance for discomfort, emotional reactions weaken. The mind becomes less sensitive, less reactive. Calm emerges not from avoiding triggers, but from no longer being ruled by them. Discomfort strengthens discipline. Choosing effort over ease builds self-respect. Each time the mind resists the urge to escape discomfort, it reinforces control. This discipline carries over into all areas of life work, relationships, and personal challenges. The mind becomes dependable under stress. Viewing discomfort as training also changes the meaning of pressure. Pressure no longer signals failure or danger, it signals growth. The Stoic does not seek discomfort recklessly, but neither does it flee from it. There is balance embracing challenge without unnecessary suffering. Over time, this practice changes identity. The mind no longer sees itself as fragile, it sees itself as capable. This shift creates calm even before pressure arrives. Confidence is no longer dependent on comfort, certainty, or control. It rests on endurance. Discomfort does not last forever. Growth does. When discomfort is understood as training rather than punishment, fear fades. Pressure becomes purposeful, and the mind remains steady, not because life is gentle, but because strength has been earned through discipline. True control is mastery of self, not of circumstances. Most people believe power comes from shaping the world to fit their desires. They seek control over outcomes, situations, and other people, assuming that peace will follow once everything is arranged correctly. Stoicism dismantles this illusion. Circumstances are unstable by nature. The only reliable form of control is internal, rooted in character, judgment, and deliberate action. Circumstances shift without warning. Plans fail, people change, and unexpected challenges arise. When calm depends on external order, it collapses the moment that order is disrupted. Stoicism teaches that stability must come from within, because only the self remains fully accessible in every situation. This realization transforms how pressure is experienced. Instead of fighting to control the uncontrollable, attention turns inward toward what can always be governed. Mastery of self begins with awareness. Thoughts are observed rather than blindly followed. Emotions are felt without being allowed to dictate behavior. Desires are examined instead of indulged automatically. This awareness creates separation between impulse and action. Within that separation lies freedom. The mind learns that it does not have to obey every urge or fear. Self-mastery also requires discipline. Discipline is the ability to act according to reason rather than mood. Under pressure, moods fluctuate and emotions intensify. Without discipline, behavior becomes inconsistent and reactive. With discipline, action remains steady regardless of internal or external turbulence. This steadiness is the foundation of true control. Another aspect of self-mastery is restraint. Not every thought needs expression. Not every emotion needs release. Restraint preserves dignity and prevents regret. The Stoic understands that silence, patience, and timing are forms of strength. By choosing when to act and when to wait, the mind remains composed even in difficult situations. True control also involves aligning actions with values. When actions are guided by principle rather than convenience, inner conflict dissolves. Pressure loses its ability to compromise integrity. Even in failure or loss, peace remains because behavior remains consistent with character. This internal alignment creates a sense of stability that circumstances cannot provide. The pursuit of external control often leads to frustration and anger. People resist when they feel controlled. Situations rarely unfold as planned. By releasing the need to dominate circumstances, emotional energy is conserved. This energy is redirected toward self-improvement rather than external struggle. The mind becomes lighter, calmer, and more focused. Self-mastery strengthens resilience. When setbacks occur, the Stoic does not feel defeated. Control remains over response, interpretation, and next steps. Even in adversity there is agency. This sense of agency prevents despair and maintains motivation. Another benefit of self-control is freedom from comparison. When attention is focused inward, external competition loses significance. Success and failure are measured by effort and integrity rather than status or recognition. This internal metric protects peace in a world driven by comparison. Over time, mastery of self becomes a source of quiet confidence. There is no need to force outcomes or impress others. The mind trusts itself to respond well regardless of circumstances. This trust is earned through consistent discipline and reflection. Pressure reveals the difference between controlling the world and controlling the self. Those who seek external control are shaken when it slips away. Those who master themselves remain steady even when everything changes. This steadiness is not passive, it is powerful. True control is not loud or aggressive. It does not demand obedience from the world. It governs thoughts, guides actions, and preserves integrity. When the self is mastered, circumstances lose their power to disturb. Calm becomes durable, strength becomes internal, and under pressure the mind stands firm, not because everything is controlled, but because the one thing that matters is